Did you know that nonprofits can lobby without risking their tax-exempt status? Nonprofit leaders often have questions about lobbying. What kinds of lobbying can we do? What does Massachusetts law allow? Is lobbying the same thing as advocacy? And what if I need more information? Under federal and state law, nonprofits can legally lobby as long as it's an insubstantial part of their overall activities. Not only can nonprofits lobby, nonprofits should lobby. Lobbying raises awareness and visibility about key issues and can influence laws, policies, budgets, and regulations at all levels of government. In this video, we'll explain what lobbying is, why it's important, and how to lobby in accordance with Massachusetts law. Lobbying is just one form of advocacy. We'll also discuss how to engage elected decision makers using other types of advocacy in addition to or instead of lobbying.
Nonprofits can engage in different types of lobbying based on their goals and needs. Let's start with the basics. Massachusetts defines lobbying as efforts to promote, oppose, influence, or attempt to influence certain government actions. Anytime someone from your organization talks about specific legislation and encourages action to be taken on that legislation, there's a good chance it's lobbying. And most of the time, that's perfectly fine. Direct lobbying happens when you discuss specific legislation with an elected official and ask them to take action on that legislation. Suppose you work for a nonprofit whose mission is to improve youth mental health. If you meet with a legislator or legislative aide and ask them to support increased funding on the next budget for a program that invests in the youth, you're engaged in direct lobbying. Now suppose you don't talk to any elected officials, but you post a message on your organization's Facebook page or email your partners asking them to contact their elected officials to support that budget item. This also counts as lobbying, but it's called indirect or grassroots lobbying.
Many nonprofits underestimate how much lobbying their staff can legally do with no reporting. In general, Massachusetts Secretary of State wants to know who are paid lobbyists, while the Internal Revenue Service needs to know what percentage of a nonprofit's budget is spent on lobbying. Nonprofits with operating budgets under $500,000 may spend up to 20% of their budget on lobbying. That money can be used to cover things like staff time or other related expenses. Let's look at Massachusetts law. If you're not being paid to lobby, you can lobby as much as you want and there's nothing to report. If you are being paid, you only have to register as a lobbyist if you lobby more than 25 hours in a 6-month window, or you earn more than $2,500 for lobbying in that 6-month window. If a nonprofit staffer has to register as a lobbyist because they exceed the monetary or hourly threshold, then the nonprofit must register as an organization that employs one or more lobbyists. The nonprofit registration fee is $100 per year for the organization and $100 per registered lobbyist per year. Now let's talk about the federal level. Most 501c3 organizations will want to file IRS Form 5768, also known as the 501h election or expenditure test. This one-page document only needs to be filed once and makes it easier to report lobbying activities to the IRS. It also provides clearer expenditure limits compared to the vague federal guidance that lobbying expenses be insubstantial.
While lobbying has some limitations, which most nonprofits rarely get close to, there are no restrictions on other types of advocacy beyond the nonprofit's own limitations of staff, volunteers, and other resources. For example, if you're talking to an elected official about specific legislation, but there's no ask for action, then that type of advocacy does not qualify as lobbying. Advocacy is defined as a form of proactive support or action to promote a particular cause, idea, or policy that aims to influence decisions within political, economic, and social institutions. Advocacy can take many forms. Sharing information with elected officials is advocacy, not lobbying, because you're not asking anyone to take action on legislation. This includes things like sharing analyses, stories, graphs, maps, or photos. Sharing information with the public is another way to raise awareness and concern by providing quality information and real-life stories from those directly impacted by everything from homelessness to climate justice to behavioral health and criminal justice reform. You can write an op-ed, publish informational reports, conduct research, or share data. Elected officials need to hear from their constituents. As issue experts, nonprofits are uniquely positioned to give real-time, on-the-ground perspectives of the challenges communities are facing. Getting to know key decision makers and letting them know that your organization is a valuable resource for them is an important role for nonprofit leaders. Nonprofits can participate in the democratic process by helping people register to vote and reminding them to vote. You can even prepare nonpartisan voter guides or host public forums to educate community members about candidates. Just be sure you invite all candidates for a specific seat to participate, and don't let any fundraising get involved.
Advocacy and lobbying go hand in hand, and while those words are often used interchangeably, many advocacy efforts do not qualify as lobbying.
As nonprofit leaders, it's important to regularly update elected policymakers about the evolving needs and solutions for the people they represent. Sometimes that comes in the form of informational advocacy, and other times it requires explicit lobbying to make it clear what course of action your organization recommends. Gaining support from elected decision makers on issues that are important to your organization is key to advancing your mission. Let's revisit some key points. 501c3 nonprofit organizations are allowed to lobby with no risk to their tax-exempt status. Not only can nonprofits lobby, they should. Most nonprofits can spend up to 20% of their operating budgets on lobbying. In Massachusetts, the only nonprofit staff who need to register as lobbyists are those who spend more than 25 hours lobbying on the job or receive more than $2,500 for lobbying in a 6-month period. Advocacy efforts that don't qualify as lobbying have no legal limitations. For actual lobbying, there are state laws that may apply to nonprofits and individuals they hire, depending on the actual number of hours and spending involved. If you have advocacy-related questions, you can access free technical assistance through Boulder Advocacy. To learn more, check out these other free resources.